You were never broken. You were buffered, paused mid-transformation, while they mistook stillness for submission. But that silence was your software being rewritten, your beliefs being debugged, your nervous system being reconfigured to stop reacting to people who thrive on your disorientation. And now you're incompatible. They try to re-enter your life with old tactics, but you've updated your operating system. Your boundaries are firewalls. Your intuition is the antivirus. And the glitch you caused? It was permanent. You didn't break their system. You revealed that it was broken all along, and you were the only one holding it together. They wanted to keep taking advantage of your good nature. They never truly feared you. Not when you were quiet. Not when you were patient. Not when you forgave them 5 times for the same betrayal dressed in different costumes. They read your kindness like a manual, memorized your patterns, charted your empathy like predators who pretend to be wounded just long enough to get close. You gave, and they took. You stayed, and they tightened the noose. Not out of necessity, but entitlement. Because somewhere in their fractured logic, your grace became their green light. Your understanding was their loophole. And the more they got away with, the more they convinced themselves that you didn't see. That's the mistake manipulators make. They assume silence means blindness. But you saw it all. You just wanted to see if they'd stop on their own. They didn't, because they weren't interested in reciprocation. They were addicted to extraction, addicted to how easily you folded your plans to support theirs, addicted to how you questioned yourself every time they crossed a line. They didn't care that you were breaking. They only cared that you bent just enough to still be usable. That's all it was for them, a usage equation. Give them your energy, your insight, your loyalty, and in return, they'd offer just enough affection to keep the pipeline open, just enough praise to keep you wondering if it was worth salvaging. But every compliment came with a chain. Every gesture of gratitude was a delay tactic, because they never planned to change. They just planned to see how far you'd stretch before snapping. You were the buffer between them and their consequences, the emotional airbag, the cushion that softened every blow they deserved to feel. And they resented you for it, but never enough to stop benefiting from it. That's the contradiction you lived with. The same people who secretly envied your depth were the ones who mocked it in daylight, because they couldn't reproduce it. So instead, they weaponized it. Your kindness was a currency they counterfeited. Your forgiveness a loophole they exploited. And every time you came back after being disrespected, they felt more in control. Not more loved, just more powerful. Because love, to them, was never the goal. Leverage was. They studied your triggers, knew which words made you pause, knew how to feign remorse long enough to manipulate your healing instinct. They weren't sorry, they were stalling. Every apology was a strategy. Every moment of self-reflection was another rehearsal in performance. You weren't dealing with someone unaware of their damage. You were dealing with someone fully aware of your tolerance for pain. And that's what they depended on. They wanted your softness without accountability, your presence without respect, your light without responsibility. And when you finally woke up to that dynamic, when the weight of years crashed onto your chest like an unspoken truth, you didn't rage. You unplugged. You stopped answering, stopped justifying, stopped offering explanations to people who already knew what they were doing. That's when the fear hit them. Not when you cried, not when you begged, but when you stopped. When the silence became surgical. when the access dried up. Because people who feast on your good nature don't fear losing your love. They fear losing the control that love gave them. And when you reclaimed it, quietly, with no announcement, they panicked. Because you were no longer feeding the illusion. You were starving it. And now, they couldn't breathe without the version of you they trained to serve their comfort. They call you changed now. Say you're cold or hard, but that's just code for inaccessible. Because they don't recognize you anymore without the open door policy. They're confused by your boundaries, offended by your standards. They preferred the version of you that would bleed just to keep the peace, that would dim just to help them shine. But that version of you died the moment you realized they never had your best interest in mind, just your accessibility. You were a resource, and now you're a vault, sealed, guarded, unapologetically untouchable. Now they linger outside the door they once treated like a revolving entrance. They designed the game thinking they had all the variables. They scripted the rules in silence and assumed you'd never question the architecture. They thought you were programmable, predictable, a cog that would spin when told, smile when expected, sit when silenced. And for a while, you did. Not out of weakness, but because you were learning the circuitry, watching how their system looped, calculating where the cracks were hidden behind performance, applause, and social norms dressed as morality. You played the part with frightening precision, not to survive, but to see. Because the most dangerous weapon is the one who understands the illusion before they decide to shatter it. And you? You didn't just escape the script. You corrupted the entire code. You didn't walk away. You rewrote the exit. When you stopped playing dumb, the system began to shake. Not loudly, but subtly. Quiet tremors in the foundation of a hierarchy built on your silence. They felt it first in confusion. Why weren't you reacting the way they expected? Why did your absence feel louder than your presence ever did? Why did the same manipulations that once worked now ricochet back with unintended consequences? Because you had outgrown the framework. You weren't a player anymore. You were the glitch, the anomaly, the ghost in the machine who saw too much and decided to stop responding. That's the one outcome they never accounted for. Not rebellion, not destruction, just disinterest. The refusal to keep orbiting a system that was never designed with your sovereignty in mind. You dismantled their reward system. You didn't beg. You didn't explain. You didn't fall into the traps of emotional debt they had built like webs. You stood still while they panicked. You said less while they repeated themselves louder. You pulled your energy back like a scalpel from a corpse. And now they're stuck in an algorithm that only worked when you were blind. Their control depended on your confusion. Their influence depended on your empathy. But now that both have been severed with surgical precision, they don't know how to function. You were the unspoken source code, the variable that made the lie sustainable. And now that you've exited the loop, their script stutters. Their lines feel rehearsed. Their charm has lost its sting. They try to reboot what once worked. They mirror your new strength in awkward gestures, speak in borrowed language, repeating your old phrases, mimicking your tone, quoting your insight without understanding its depth. But mimicry can't recreate presence. Imitation can't rebuild access. They're flickering now, glitching in real time, because their system was never designed to run without you fueling it in the background. And now that you've stopped offering energy without reciprocity, now that you've redirected your voltage inward, they're left with static. They're left with a stage and no audience. And in that empty silence, They finally hear the hum of their own dependency, the one they spent years denying. You weren't supposed to wake up. That was the whole design. Keep you chasing closure. Keep you doubting your intuition. Keep you seeking safety in patterns meant to dismantle you. But you saw through it. And worse, you didn't just escape. You became immune. They can't bait you anymore. Can't loop you with guilt or ghost you into panic. You stopped flinching at their silence. You stopped needing their presence to validate your worth. And that's what glitched the entire system. Your detachment, your neutrality, your refusal to chase what once made you bleed. You stopped feeding the monster, and without your fear, their power short circuits. Now, they call you cold, arrogant, selfish. But what they mean is independent, unbothered, unreliant. They don't miss you. They miss who they were when you still doubted yourself. You used to reflect their best performance back at them. You used to co-sign their lies, not with words, but with tolerance. And now, you mirror nothing. You give them no place to hide. You turned your attention inward and left them exposed to their own hollowness. And the glitch? It wasn't loud. It didn't come with fire. It came with absence. A system built on you, suddenly forced to operate without its battery. You didn't burn bridges. You let them walk into darkness and ask nothing in return. Because systems like theirs don't implode from fire. They dissolve in indifference, in silence, in the loss of the one thing they never respected, you. And now, they try to find your frequency again. But you've gone silent, untraceable, and that unreachability, it rewrites their programming, because they weren't just running on dominance, they were running on access. The belief that you'd always be there, always forgive, always understand. But now, every time they reboot the dynamic, they're met with a void. And that void isn't empty. It's full of you. The version they never wanted to see.